All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Cryo-EM Current Practices webinar, organized by the three national centers established by the NIH Common Fund Transformative High Resolution Cryo-Electron Microscopy Program. Today, you're joining a panel of staff from the National Center for Cryo-EM Access and Training, NCCAT, the Pacific Northwest Cryo-EM Center, PNCC, and the Stanford SLAC Cryo-EM Center, S2C2, for a special holiday edition of our series. My name is Christina Zamani. I'm a scientist and training liaison at NCCAT, and I'll be moderating today's roundtable. And I'm joined by a number of staff from each center. And so I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves shortly. But first, for anyone joining us for the first time today, this is a regular event we host every month, highlighting methods, tips, and tricks that groups are using to collect and interpret data they can obtain with the help of National Cryo-EM Center resources. And we do have recordings of all of our past talks, as well as information about the NIH-funded cryo-EM resources at cryoemcenters.org. So we encourage you to check that out if this is news to you that this is a regular event of ours. But today, instead of a formal talk, we're here in a meeting style session to have a conversation about some of the good, the bad, and the ugly things that we see using transmission electron microscopes. So the panel we've assembled has what I think is a uniquely impressive level of knowledge and experience. And so I hope our conversation today can help those of you who don't live and breathe cryo-EM every day to make better sense of what you're looking at as you embark on your own cryo-EM journeys. So our agenda for today is that I'm going to give each center a quick minute to provide an update about the resources we make available at no cost to the research community. And then I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves. And as a way of introduction, I've asked them to choose a micrograph that they find particularly interesting and tell us what they see in that image. And then once we've gotten to know our panel, we have some images that were submitted from our call for submissions, and we'll take a look at those and answer those questions. And then we can open up to other questions from everyone in the room. And if we don't have a lot of questions, we have a few other interesting images queued up. And just to see, do we see what you see, or do you see what we see? So I think this will be a fun and informative conversation. So let's get right to it. If you do have questions, you can raise your hand using that feature here in Zoom. And I will call names when I see hands raised. And you can also send questions using the chat at any point, and we'll get to as many questions as we can during the hour. But first, I'm going to turn over to a representative from each of the center to give any updates on what's going on there. So Kirsten is here from PNCC, and I believe she was going to give a quick update from Portland.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, my name is Kirsten Wheeler, and I'm the Administrative Coordinator for Pacific Northwest Cryo-EM Center. PNCC has two types of proposals, the first being screening access, which allows one user to come on site for up to 5 days of sample preparation and screening with staff. This proposal is aimed at low resource institutions. And the second proposal type is general access, which awards up to 480 hours of microscope time for 2 years. This time can be used for screening or data collection. Approved general access proposals are also eligible for our training workshops, which cover topics from sample preparation through data processing, some of which occur more than once a year. And those are available on our website. If you're interested, please go to pncc.labworks.org and apply today. Deadlines for proposals are the first of each month.
All right. Thank you, Kirsten. Next, I'm actually going to turn over to Ed Eng to give a quick update from NCCAT.
Okay, in terms of NCCAT, like the other centers, we offer a robust data collection, screening, and training program. Something that we're trying to do, getting ready for 2024. We're installing a Glacius 2 with a Selectress and Falcon 4i. So not only will we improve and double our capacity for screening, but also for data collection. On the training front, we have a single particle short course coming up in March. Deadline for applications is January 1st. Also, in terms of cryo merit badges, they actually do exist at NCCAT. We actually have a button maker. So if you come and earn a merit badge at NCCAT, you can make your own merit badge. I hope to see you soon. And if you're also, one more plug, at M&M, all the national centers are co-hosting an education and microscopy section. So if you're going to microscopy and microanalysis in Cleveland next year, please do apply. To find out more, go to nccat.nysbc.org.
Thank you, Ed. And giving an update from S2C2, Amy Liu, go ahead and.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amy Liu. I'm one of the cryo-EM specialists at Stanford SLAC Cryo-EM Center. So like the other two centers, we do offer high resolution data collection service, as well as training and screening. So our services are at no cost. And we currently have 3 cryos running, and we are gonna have our 4th cryos and a Tundra and a Glucose installed early next year. So if you have any questions, feel free to email one of the staffs, and we are glad to help.
All right, thank you all. Let me switch my slide collection real quick. All right, let's see how this looks. And actually, that's an easy transition because Amy, I'm going to let you go first. You can introduce yourself and let us know what you see in this micrograph.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a story about this sample. So I have a user who is a very experienced crystallographer, and one day she brought a sample, the exact sample she used for crystallization. But she wants to do cryo-EM. So we put the sample on a grid, and not surprisingly, we see 2D crystal lattice. So you can see the red arrow is pointing this. This picture I found very interesting because I thought with diluted sample, we shouldn't still see the crystals anymore. However, they are still there, and in my experience, 2D crystals are not good for cryo-EM. For single particle cryo-EM reconstruction. So I think for people who are used to crystallize their proteins, they may consider, if they see this like 2D crystals in the micrograph, they may consider changing buffers or do some extra troubleshooting.
Thanks. So next, Kasahoon, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Hello, my name is Kasahoon Nasalu, and I am a staff scientist here at NYSBC. And most of the time, I spend my time helping our users with their data collection on the cryos. And I chose this image from one of our sessions because apoferritin is one of the samples we use to do a lot of testing on site. And it has a very good distribution of particles. So if we are doing single particle, this is the kind of distribution we want to see. For each micrograph, you have a lot of particles you can pick to take forward for processing. So yeah.
Thank you, Kasahoon. Craig, you get to go next.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Craig from PNCC. I think every time I walk by the microscopes, every once in a while, I'll see stuff that I'm just like, what the heck is that? And this was one of those moments. And I feel like there's so much to discuss in this image if you are familiar with cryo-EM in a data collection. But to start it off, I'll point out the obvious thing is those dense sort of blobs of areas in this image that look like devitrified or dried out or eutectic ice. I think they're the kind of terms that go by a lot of different names, and a lot of people have different names for the same thing or use the same name for different things. So I thought I would bring that up, this as an example in this image. I think this image is also included in your round 2 of images. And so there's much more to discuss. So we can talk about it later with everyone's input. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Nancy, you're up next.
Sure. So this is something I always hate to see. It's clearly not ice that you would want. It's not, leopard ice or gator ice, but it always reminds me of fish scale. So I always call it fish scale ice. I can't say what exactly causes this, but I guess I wanted to point out that you can see it from the level of your view magnification in the holes as that kind of salt and pepper speckling. And I often see it in little isolated areas. So I see it at the top in those holes, but then at the very bottom, I see less of it. And so sometimes I can collect in holes that are right next to this really bad ice. And so, yeah, I just want to point out that, pay attention to what you're seeing in the view mag. It's indicative of what's going on in the holes. Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy. Next is Joshua.
Hi, everybody. I'm a scientist at NCCAT as well, helping users in general. So I chose this image because every once in a while, similar to Craig, I see something that is I did not suspect to see on the micrograph. So here we have a very thin ice that broke as it was being collected, but instead of moving away, it kind of just like landed on top to ice next to it, very gently, to the point that when the image was collected, you still have a noticeable power spectrum signal that you're able to fit and you actually get a decent CTF out of it. So this is one of those micrographs that you would not expect to have anything useful, and which is still will be problematic to process, although you can still probably pick some of the particles there and use them if you're in dire need. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting micrograph that I don't typically see. I usually see them like flying out. But here you can see the 2 layers of ice and the particles on top of each other. So I thought it was fun.
Thank you, Josh. Next, Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Mulligan from PNCC. I included these 2 pictures because I thought they were interesting. The whole level image, you can see a lot going on. There's some melted areas in the top, and then it goes on to have vitreous ice, which was pretty weird to see something so severely damaged, but then still having a good area on the same grid square. And then the image of the apoferritin particles, as it started to melt, the particles bunched up together and were damaged. And so I thought that was an interesting looking image as well. Thanks.
Wrong deck. I don't know if you can point me, Alexandra, can you point me to the right image? Oh, and sorry, can you say that again?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Can you ask again, because it was I couldn't hear.
I think I don't have your introduction image in the right deck, so I don't know if you can point me to which image you wanted to introduce yourself with.
Alex, we couldn't hear you.
Oh, it's the slide 24. You are not hearing me? Oh yeah,
Okay.
okay. Yes.
There we go.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
Take us away.
Okay, so I'm Alex Alexandre from S2C2, and what I want to show is this images with different thickness heights between the grid squares with large virus particles. So the virus is a particle that has a size between 25 to 100 something nanometers, and this make us to find the thicker ice compared to the other small complex proteins. So most of the time we have a lot of particles inside of the carbon, but not well spread inside of the holes. So this is the kind of image that we always have with differential position of the particle. So at the left, we have a very good amount of particles in the images, and on the right, we have fewer and sometimes no images. So then we need to use another strategies that it's increase the number of shots per hole. But yeah, it's a kind of thing that I like to show.
Awesome. Thank you. I think this fits a theme with one of the questions that we had pre-submitted. So that's very helpful. So that is our panel. Everyone has introduced themselves. What I'm going to do now is actually the images that were pre-submitted. The panel did not see all of them. So this will be sort of on the fly, very honest, immediate feedback. And so I'm going to keep an eye on raised hands and questions coming in. But if our panel wants to help me out with that as well. But what I'm going to do is just go ahead and keep sharing and start with the first question we got. And this is actually not at the level of a high resolution image, but actually a micrograph of a grid square. This person gave us their conditions. They're in sort of tris neutral pH with 300 millimolar salt, and they see this big splotchy dark thing in the middle of the grid square, as well as some spots around the side. And the question is, what is this? And what do we do about it? So first panelist to unmute gets to start.
I hate this and I see it all the time, and it's usually I could say in my experience it's usually very sample specific. So some of my users will have this issue and then they will try a different sample and they will not have that issue anymore. So it's I've come to think that it's not something they're doing with the freezing that's wrong, that it's related to something about the sample itself. I suspect it has something to do with the surface tension and how the sample is spreading, and I'd love to hear what anybody else thinks. Because I think those little dark spots are where the sample is kind of beating up a little bit, and then the big spot is a large example of it kind of beating up and not spreading smoothly. Does anybody else have some more educated opinion?
In my experience, I completely agree with you that it's related with the sample and more precisely with the buffer of the sample that makes the spread or not well in the grid. And every time that I have this, we can minimize changing the parameter of the glow discharge. So every time that we have very thicker ice in the center of the squares, and not the opposite that will be much more normal in the edges, thicker ice in the center, thinner. It's a glow discharge parameter that we can change and work with and then try to improve. We cannot guarantee, but sometimes the glow discharge changes make a lot of better options. Yeah.
I was going to mention this is an example of why screening is useful, because you can identify this while you're making grids and you can adjust parameters while you're still freezing. As the close discharge goes, collecting is possible, although it's very manual and it can be very difficult to get good data out of this. So if you're truly trying to get to high resolution, sample optimization might be where you want to put your effort rather than processing and collecting.
Yeah, it's very time consuming when you have that combination of completely dry holes and then holes, right next door that have ice in them. So ideally, if you can get better spread on the grids, it'll make your life easier. But like you said, like you can collect if you've got enough, but it's very very craft. Very
Your hand will hurt.
yeah.
Does everyone think those really dark, smaller spots, those are ice, like snowflakes, right? Like little ice crystals or ice contamination?
Only the dark ones.
The dark ones, yeah.
I think the smaller ones are where it's just kind of dry.
Yep,
and
agreed.
heated up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, can you see my mouse cursor?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so like these very dark things, to me that looks
Yeah.
like ice. But yeah, then there's these little smaller dots, which are
Yeah.
sort of
And the ice
micro
crystals-
versions of this.
Ice crystals in this square are not a problem. They wouldn't be a problem if there was nice ice distributed across the square. It's not anywhere close to the level of quote unquote contamination that I would worry about. Yeah, I think the bigger issue is what Joshua and Nancy mentioned. And just to put a number on it, I think the difference in ice distribution across squares can make as much as a 4x difference in the throughput you end up being able to achieve in terms of data collection. So like, I think all the centers get a lot of questions from users. It's like, how much data can you collect per unit time? And I always say it's very variable, and this is one of those variables that's super important as to that factor. So I'm not making it up, like 2 to 4x difference in throughput from just something like this.
Yeah.
Would love to try a buffer screen on a sample that has this issue consistently.
Yeah. So I think we're like, all the centers are willing to sometimes brute force a data collection, especially if it's really important. This would be an example of something I would feel like is kind of trying to brute force it versus getting a better grid, which you'll just collect much better data at much higher rates on.
Yeah, and I'll just recap a couple comments that are coming through on the chat. Ewan, thank you for telling us. Also, you've noticed that changing glow discharge times actually can sometimes change this kind of behavior. And then someone mentioned they see this often in chameleon grids more than Vitrobot grids. But I've definitely seen it on Vitrobot grids as well. So I think all types of grid prep may cause this. And then
For the chameleon grid, the reason that it's different is because of the way that it's being wicked away. It's self-wicking grid.
Yeah.
So you pull in and you have a ripple effect of coming back. So that's why you see it thicker in the middle rather than the grid bars as compared to Vitrobot.
All right, so I'm going to move us on to the next question. So I'm hoping everyone can see this. May depend a bit on your screen resolution, but these are particles that this user seems to have trouble getting into the holes, and I had to stare at this for a little bit to find them. But I'm gonna see there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, there's a couple here, and then there are some on the carbon substrate next door. There's a few here, and here. But I think this person has correctly assessed there aren't enough particles in the holes. What would people suggest?
Concentration, making sure it's not getting washed away.
And I think it's already, sorry. It was already mentioned on Q2 is you can use continuous carbon grids.
Yeah, but I think the concentration is low because we can't see inside of the carbon as well. So it's different when you have a lot of protein or aggregation on the carbon and they don't go to the hole. And this image that we can see very few particles in the carbon and no particles in the hole. So in my opinion, the concentration is it's a little bit low, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot on the carbon, but it could just be the contrast. You'd expect to see a lot more on the carbon. I know some people have had better luck going to smaller sized holes, which may allow you to have slightly thicker ice occasionally. These look like 2-micron holes, but maybe I'm not looking at it.
Yeah, there's all, I think, yeah, everyone, I think makes a really good point, especially Alex made the point that looking over the carbon to try and figure out what's going on, whether it's being concentrated or just not concentrated, the sample's just not concentrated enough. I always like to tell people if they have never looked at it to put in a grid, a grid of frozen buffer, just to gauge like how clean does clean carbon look, because it looks quite clean. And so then when you start looking at your grids with your actual samples and you have a question, for example, of why aren't there any more particles in my holes, you can look over the carbon and really quickly tell like, oh, that's where all my particles are, or maybe they're not there either, right? So I think it's good to be able to gauge what clean sort of carbon looks like. And in terms of working with the sample, I mean, if you can't concentrate it more, you can always double, triple, quadruple blot. You can always play with surfactants and a little bit of cryoprotectants, maybe. I think Gabe Lander had that paper where he showed that even like much higher concentrations of glycerol than most people thought was usable or are still valid. You can still collect good data. So I think you can play with things like that in the buffer.
I mean, it was up to 30%, if I remember correctly. Glycerol.
Yeah. And if the concentration is not a problem, if the user said that it's like they have a higher concentration in ml and milligram per ml, so maybe he could try to take a look in the lower magnification and see if we have like a big cluster of aggregation, because then can decrease a lot the spread of the sample, or going back to negative stain and then take a look, because we know that when we move from negative stain to cryo-EM, it's a factor of like 5-10 times that we need more samples compared to negative stain. So sometimes in negative stain is good, and they did the screening in negative stain and use the same concentration to cryo-EM, and then it's very low. Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I have to say, whoever submitted this, thank you for like picking perfect images where you also like did look at the carbon. So many times people don't do that when they don't see particles, and that's really handy. So these were very perfect images for asking this question. All right. So here's another image we got. Someone saw these streaks and thinks they might know the problem, that it's with the gain, and is having trouble fixing it. So I'm going to turn it over to the experts to
Yeah, this
opine.
is a K3 image. And there's something, I would say it's probably even more related to like inconsistencies in the statistics of one of the quadrants, one of the half channels in the K3. I'd be interested to see the other images in this data set, because if it's consistent, my go-to would always be to advise people do ad hoc gains. That is, just average your entire data set. I've had really, really good results with that. And I think actually some folks have shown that an ad hoc gain can give you a better gain reference than even a regular one taken over vacuum, just because of the sheer amount of data you're putting into it. So I've had good luck correcting data sets like this. As long as that feature is consistent across the entire data set, then you can average it all together and do sort of an ad hoc gain. But then my other worry would be like for a single particle project, the way I view things like this is sometimes I just choose to ignore it because quite honestly, it's affecting a small percentage of the image. And what would most likely happen, or I can almost guarantee would happen, is if you pick particles over those features and the features are strong enough, you'll throw those particles out during 2D classification. So what you're actually doing is you're slightly lowering your throughput. But for example, this image, there's so many particles, I wouldn't necessarily be that worried about the 5% of particles you might throw out because of this. It's just a numbers game. But that's just my 2 cents.
I agree with Craig with it's still usable data. And even if they don't get thrown out into the classifications, there's so many of them, the noise in the background probably gets averaged out anyway. It might be affecting if you're hitting Nyquist, but if you're hitting Nyquist anyway, you should probably go to a higher mag, have a better pixel size. So, yes.
I think people are always surprised about how little we care about how well the gain is correcting.
Yeah, I think Nancy makes a great point. I think we've noticed a lot of people invest a lot of stress and concern about gains and the gains. And it's I like to say that I've processed data sets sometimes from a K3, for example, where I don't apply any gain correction. You know, it's not quite as good as the result you get when you do it properly, but I would think most people would be shocked by how similar the two results are. So I think it is important to point out that the gain correction you get on cameras like the K3 and the Falcon 4 in counting mode is a residual gain correction. There is already a linear gain correction that's been applied, and that's the one that's critically important. And the counting gain correction is sort of cleaning up after that. Yeah.
And for people who were interested about the ad hoc gain, Reliant has a great tool to do it. And it's very simple to use and simple to install.
Yep, it has a good one. I think Scipion has had one for a very long time that they published a paper on a while ago. Yeah.
All right, thanks, team. I'm gonna take us to the next question. So I like this question as well because now we're going to even different mags. So now we're looking at Atlas level, and this person often sees this kind of Atlas. I think their question is what can be done to avoid it, but I guess my question would be what's wrong with these atlases, because I don't really see anything wrong with them. But I thought it might be nice to hear that from other people as well.
I mean, to avoid it, just when you're doing VitraBot, you make sure I mean, it could be that the VitraBot is more than it normally is in the gradient, or your tweezers are too low. But the atlases look great.
Yeah, tweezers
on the right,
to the center.
I presume it would be more than 2 days of data collection. Go ahead.
Yeah, the grid for me is good. The only thing, like you said, the tweezer could be a little bit down, and then you can see on the left side that it's exactly where the tweezer are because it's broken a little bit. Yes, right. And then all the rest is with a liquid that cannot go out from the pad. So yeah, but the squares look great. At least in this magnification, I cannot see inside the square, but yeah, looks great.
Yeah, and I'm generally I don't change blot force from the 0 that we find, but it may be worth trying increasing it. That might help.
So increasing the blot force on the VitraBot, you guys just brings the pads a little closer together and squishes your grid a little more. But on the VitraBot, you're always going to have some type of wedge artifact just because of how the pads come together at that angle.
Yeah, I also say this is a good atlas, especially when you have some sort of gradient where you have small to large squares. And when you're doing your data collection, you can find where your particle is the happiest. There are times where you run into issues where you don't have a lot of particles on the bigger squares, so you may move down to medium-sized squares. And sometimes you may run into preferred orientation issues when you are only collecting on like large squares versus something in the medium size. So it's always good to have different kinds of squares where you can screen and figure out where your particle is the happiest. And once you determine that, you can move forward with your data collection targeting those similar squares. So it's a good thing that you have this, and not the whole thing is the same kind of squares.
Awesome. Thanks, team. All right. So I think in this case, this person actually didn't have too many questions about what they were seeing in their micrograph, but there was a question about further interpretation. So I thought we would throw it up and take a look at it. So this is a fibrous structure, but this person, can clearly see it, but is having trouble processing. So what do any of you see here?
Long hours spent on the computer. That's what I see.
Yes, the processing will be very manual. It will be a lot of you trying different things to get good classes, trying different strategy for picking the filaments, because one way will work better than the other one. I know I had a colleague one time that did this for cardiac muscles, and he had to manually pick end to end, and then have end to end of the filament, and then write a script that would pick the particle section with some overlap, so he knew the repeating pattern and be able to overlap. It was a whole process. So it will not be your standard this process that I get a result in a week. It will be, let me think what I'm doing and why am I doing it. Storyline is the right software to use. Crosspark might be more challenging.
Yeah, and is it just the lack of a twist that's making you say all these things, or is there something else you see in here that cues you to this big slog of processing?
Well, I don't see much decoration, so it's hard for the algorithm to anchor it and align with each other. So from the 2D classes, you see there's some twist on what appears to look like there's a slight twist. But to me, it looks smeared in this direction. So it doesn't know if it's like this or like this or like that. Yeah. So that's why it will take a lot of.
I'm curious what I'm curious what the downstream issues the user's been having are. Those initial 2D classes look nice, and they look like you're picking big enough boxes so that you can kind of estimate the parameters, like the crossover. And if you can estimate the parameters well, I would think that's a big hurdle to pass. And then I know in some papers, because I've been looking at some Tau papers, they start out with a large box size just to get those helical parameters, because this does look somewhat helical. And then go back and repick with smaller box sizes once you know how they fit together. Yeah, I'm curious what the eventual issues were with this one.
Yeah, and then there's a suggestion that just popped into the chat. Thank you, Ben. About measuring the crossover length, then re-extract using a smaller box size and spend a lot of time on initial model building. I see nods from our panelists, so that seems like reasonable advice.
the more knowledge you can get about the structure with alternative methods will help you the most, because it will guide you on your reconstruction, because you will have clues of what it's supposed to look like, and you're not going in blind.
All right, so I think that's the last of our pre-submitted questions. I'm actually going to just stop sharing for a second to give us a pause, and that way we can take questions from the audience. I know there's some conversation going on in the chat, which is good. If anyone has an image they want to share to get feedback, I think we can let people screen share. So if anyone has something handy, you can raise your hand. And while people are sorting through things, maybe I will grab another image from my collection to toss up and get some feedback. Actually, Craig, I'm gonna share the image you had from before that sounded like could easily take us the rest of the time to talk about. But we can dive a bit more into some of the things that are happening here while we give people a chance to collect any images they might have and raise their hands.
Sure. I mean, I like you've included all the troubleshooting sort of stuff that I would normally use to confirm any of my suspicions. But I thought this, like I said, I thought this image was really interesting because it showed quite a few things. I don't know if anyone notices let's get some of the obvious ones out of the way. There's kind of a weird horizontal band across partway of the image. That's an invalid or outdated K3 dark gain reference normally. Again, it's not ideal, but it's like the gain issue that was brought up by the user submission. It's not necessarily a deal killer. And actually what I kind of like about this image is, despite all the things I'm going to talk about that's not great about it, I believe this data set ended up going to pretty high resolution. So you just kind of never know, right? But
there's a question from the users. You want to hear right now, or you want to talk first?
Is it a guide to add as a standard?
Actually, Amanda, did you have a question about this image, or do you have a question after this image?
I have some images that I'd like to share if possible.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
Yeah. Should we? Yeah, let me stop sharing. You can hop in right away.
All right, let's see if this works. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
That is cool.
Yeah, so these are some DNA origami structures, and the issue that I'm having now is, so the picture on the left is kind of initially, everything looks great. There's maybe a tiny bit of contamination, but we do have a lot of really nice structures in the holes. And then over time, you can see on the right what happens as I'm imaging. I'm not really sure. I mean, it kind of looks like ethane contamination to me, but obviously it's over the particles, and it's really making it difficult to get good structures for reconstruction.
I would guess the vacuum's bad on the.
Yeah. So this is not unloaded and reloaded, right? It's just, it was there, and then few hours later, you start seeing this.
Yeah, so we have a F20, so it's a single load type system. We did just replace our IGP1, and I mean, according to the software, the vacuum is where it should be. It's all as low as it can go. I guess
also partly maybe the cryo boxes, there's something a little bit off about, or it's not correctly reaching temperature. The cryo box on the F20s aren't temperature monitored. So if there's like, and that's part of to Sean's point, the cryo box is probably considered part of the vacuum system in a way, but I think you're imaging and you're kicking off things, or things are depositing and sticking to your grid while it's in the scope. So, yeah.
You see, things you can do is do a long a cryo cycle
Mhm.
just to make sure if anything is there, you can remove it.
Okay.
As the engineer to check the cryo box.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Do you think maybe replace the O-ring on the holder? Just to
Yeah,
rule that
that's
out?
possible.
the vacuum is
Oh,
going
yeah, I
low.
guess the vacuum
The
would
vacuum,
crash if that was the problem. Okay.
Yeah, we
or it
haven't
will
had
not go
any,
down super quick.
yeah, we
Yeah.
haven't had any crashes on the vacuum. I mean, I
Is it
can,
pumping is it pumping as fast as it used to, or is pumping slower?
you mean like the IGP, like IGP-1?
Yeah, when you
It's a lot
insert it.
faster. It's really fast now that we just replaced IGP-1. Before it was slow, but I was still seeing this issue before we replaced IGP-1.
Yeah, I don't think it's the O-ring then. Cryo box is most likely what it is, or there's a lot of contaminants inside the column that needs a good cryo cycle, like with heating elements.
Yeah, okay.
And just to take advantage of these images, because we saw some that somebody asked that is not going to inside of the hole. Can you see the amount of protein that complex that is on the carbon? So this is an example that we have a protein that this is the concentration is very high here. It's good. In the other example, we couldn't see any sample in the carbon. So yeah, just to call attention about that.
Graphene might help gold.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
just saying because the other example, they couldn't find anything inside of the hole, but we couldn't find anything outside the hole as well. And here we can see, it's just to let them know.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up because I wanted to mention with the other one, but the carbon wasn't saturated, that you can do multiple additions of sample to try and force things into the hole so that you oversaturate the carbon, and that can help.
Yep.
So you mentioned these are DNA cages.
They're DNA origami structures.
Do you do anything to change the charge on the carbon specifically because of the DNA content?
You
I'm
mean
just
the
curious.
glow discharge condition?
Okay.
Yeah, the glow discharge condition is very high. We do 90 seconds at positive 30 milliamps, which seems extreme, but it actually works really well for these structures. I've looked at single DNA origamis, and then these are just a dimer type structure, but it works.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll stop sharing. Thank you so much for the feedback. That was really helpful.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. We have another hand up. I think Leah had some images she wants to share, so you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. So we have a question regarding this concrete. Yeah, now if you can see. So the question is, how do you deal with the tapered orientation problem? We got already one answer in the chat that for someone it got that no glow discharging worked, but what else can be done? And is there any option of spinning more holes a possibility?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't have any advice beyond what I mentioned. And that was just that one of the people at PNCC had success in not glow discharging their grids, which I didn't think would work, but it did. So I just wanted to mention.
Okay. And also, continuation of the same question, do you think that using microscopes or detergents into the sample might help, or yeah?
I think I didn't quite catch that. Can you say that again?
Do you think that using any cryoprotectants or cosmotropes or any detergents in the same sample might help?
Oh yeah, I saw the same question in the chat. I was just about to answer. I don't think anyone has a silver bullet answer for that, because if it existed, we'd all be doing it. I think generally, like there's some surfactants or more surfactant-like detergents with higher CMCs or whatnot. There's things that people have shown can help, and they're maybe more or less generalizable, but I don't think there's anything general. There's like a general answer for any sample out there.
I see a variety of sized things in here. Do you see your protein in here, and do you get reasonable 2D classes, albeit in one orientation?
2D classes, but while making the 3D reconstruction, we can't do it because of this preferred orientation problem. And the maximum we can go like 5 to 4.5 to 5 angstrom, but not more than that.
If the grids are already made and that's what you have on hand, then you're stuck with tilting as a brute force measure at the moment.
Yeah,
Why
if you
tilting not too much,
I was gonna say, if you have the option, maybe you could use a different way of preparing the grids, maybe using chameleon. If not, the tilting, I think, might be the way to go, and you can potentially recover some of the stuff you lose by, running into a thicker ice, but it may give you views that you don't have. So,
is this a negative stain image?
No.
It's just over a continuous substrate.
Are you concerned about the contrast? The reverse
There's
contrast?
something that looks odd about this to me, and I'm trying to...
Well, one thing is like,
right?
Yeah, it's a use of cryoGrid. Answer from Africa.
yeah, there's that
It's not a
burn
negative
blob too.
The dark shadow, right, Sean? And none of the shadow for the like thicker eyes with the bubbling.
Yeah.
Is this just maybe overexposed already? A bit?
This is exposed already in 54.
It's kind of hard to understand what you're saying. Sophie.
We don't have all the information with us right now. So.
Yeah, I think we're having a little bit of trouble hearing for some reason.
I think we don't know by now, like, it is not us who actually take the pictures. We have someone for us to take the pictures. So we don't know the exact information with respect to exposure times and so on.
Gotcha.
Which we couldn't answer, and we were discussing it just with, like, I know each other. But it's a user CryoGrid data, but it was taken on an instrument with like a little lower resolution, I think. So, and 200 kV cryo instrument. So therefore, this could be that you have expression that is overexposed in that time, in that amount you see here. We were just wondering what would be other options, but I think you kind of have given us the things which we also tried out. And I think we might have to just play around with, as we said, using maybe a different instrument or different options to prepare the grid. This might be something we just have to go with rather than trying it, as we did now. So thanks for your help. Yeah, thank you. Please, go on with the discussion.
Thanks for sharing. I see another hand up. So Maria, go ahead and share your problems with us.
It seems like I haven't updated my Zoom preferences. So if I want to be able to share, I would have to change my preferences, and it's probably going to kick me out. But what I have is, I can explain it, and I think it should be okay. But with C-flat grids, what I've been seeing is that a lot of the carbon rips off of the grid. So like half or more than half of my grid has ripped off squares. So I don't know if other people have been seeing ripped off squares specifically on the C-flat grids. And then also I use the GP2 to freeze. So it's hard to change the blot force because the GP2, the Leica, doesn't have that parameter. So I don't know, has anybody seen any problems with the C-flats ripping off or any suggestions on what I can do for that?
Are they 200? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
I was
go ahead.
no problem. I was gonna ask also if they're 200 mesh, but also
Yeah.
you can order the thicker ones, and I've had more
Mhm.
success with those. They're, I think, called T50s.
Okay, thank you. T50s.
Also, batch
Sorry,
we
go
have
on.
because it could be just a batch issue. It might just be that one batch is not good.
Yeah, that's a great
Okay.
point. You can try different box, and so I think everyone should always try that. That's a good thing to bring up.
Yeah, and you can put almost all these grids under like a pretty cheap light microscope and actually see the surface and all the holes. And when we've had issues like this in the past, I always kind of want to check out the batch first, like randomly sample a couple of grids from a batch just to make sure that they're not damaged before I even start working with them.
Yeah, I've done that because we did get a light microscope and they look fine before they come in, and I can actually see the little carbon piece on the filter paper.
Okay, yeah, then they're probably just being damaged. Like Sean said, I think 200 mesh grids are just way more fragile. And then there's a thicker variant of the C-flats. And another thing we've often done is just evaporate a fresh layer of carbon on C-flats in the past. Helps too.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can even
thank
do
you.
gold if you want.
Yeah, you can sputter gold actually onto the C-flats and make your own ultra foils kind of that work really well, I think, for some people.
You get them in less than a year.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm gonna call our next hand is the last hand. I'm sure we could stay here for a month. So at some point we have to say it's time. So Morgan, go ahead and take us away with one final question today.
Yeah, I have an image. Can y'all see this? Has anyone seen this before? It's actually from a while ago.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
it's
even really remember.
protein aggregation and maybe some wrinkles in the carbon, and it's pulling
So
up
you
there.
think the aggregation is kind of like the overall fuzziness, and then the wrinkles would be the dash, because like the dashes are so precise.
Strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd say.
Okay. So is that like
yeah, I have seen this before too.
So you
Yeah,
think
I
the
haven't seen this
dashes are
either.
like grid specific, or sorry, say more.
They seem to go between the holes so that the dashes are created by where the holes are. So it's just kind of it's either a ridge or a trough. I mean, is my guess.
Yeah.
But for some reason it's following that pattern, and then the holes just create the dash effect, I think.
Yeah, and carbon copper grids, they shrink a little bit under liquid nitrogen temps, so you can get variations in height and like kind of troughs and ridges like Nancy was saying.
If you
But I'd
took
say the
like,
majority of
yeah,
that's aggregation.
if you took like a high mag image, like Sean's saying, like you'll probably see that it's clumps of protein, most likely.
Yes, I
in the
did.
dark.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Thank you.
And when aggregation's this severe, it can be difficult to dilute it. So just be mindful of that. You may start diluting and then it all disappears at one point.
Okay. This was from an old sample. I just remembered I had this picture on my
Yeah,
phone from a
all
while
good. Thanks
ago,
for
but I don't
sharing it.
remember how it even turned out.
Yeah, it's
Thanks.
a good one.
I'm a fan of answers that, even if they're unfortunate, are at least definitive. Nice to have an answer, even if it's not the one you wanted to hear. So I think we will wrap up for today. As I said, we could probably go on all day long. So perhaps we'll have to do another iteration of this sometime soon. I think it's nice to all come together in one room and realize a lot of us have some of the same problems, and it's good to know you have friends who can help. So I think all of us at the national centers, we really enjoy working on tricky problems, and we see a lot of things. So we hope that we're a useful resource. for answering questions. So please let us know how we can help you. And hopefully we see you all again, maybe at our centers or maybe back here on Zoom. So thank you for joining us today.